This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on the Apple Podcast Store, rate the podcast on Spotify, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. Due to poor planning on my part, and not at all related to the Christian holiday, next weekend we will not have a new episode. I had an interview that fell through and I did not have a buffer. The team was fully ready to produce another podcast, and yet I didn't have an interview ready to go. So, for next weekend, which does happen to be Easter, I have a few recommendations for you. One, after you've listened to this episode, Robert Peoples of Affinis Humanity, listen to it again. Robert is absolutely amazing. I'm also going to recommend 3 episodes that capture a lot of what you hear in Robert's story today about humanism that is alive and proactively loving. The first is Jennifer Michael Hecht from way back in 2019. She wrote the book Doubt, A History. I have quoted that 1,000 times. It's an amazing conversation, and she is absolutely amazing. Next up is Anthony Pinn of Rice University. Robert and I talk about Anthony in this episode that I believe is back in 2020. Anthony has written a number of books on humanism, as well as the perspective from the Black community, a really significant voice within humanism. So go back and check out that episode. And finally, Sasha Sagan's episode where she talks about her book, Small Creatures Such as We. These 3 and Robert's episodes today that you're listening to represent secular grace and the kind of humanism that I am trying to espouse. So during your Easter weekend, jump back into the back catalog and hear some great interviews from the past. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's episode. On to today's episode. My guest today is Robert Peoples. Robert is the founder of Affinis Humanity, which is an organization that is trying to promote secularism in Arizona. Their motto, Affinis, is Latin for affinity, a natural attraction to a person, thing, or idea. Our mission is to alleviate religious discrimination for secular communities in education, business, and government. Robert also participates with the Secular Coalition for Arizona, and they recently had Secular Day Arizona, where they spoke and talked with legislative leaders in Arizona about secularism and the need for secularism. We discuss secularism as pluralism, the need to recognize that even for believers, separation of church and state is good for the church as well as the state. Robert represents secular grace in so many ways. He is a humanist who is focused on loving people, caring for people, for representing a proactive love. And Robert's motto for Affinis Humanity is, to be human is enough. I cannot tell you how deeply impacted I am by that simple phrase. I will be meditating on that for years to come. Robert is a quote machine. I will try to capture a handful of those quotes in the extended show notes on the blog. Listen carefully to what he has to say. Robert is an amazing person. Here is Robert Peoples to tell his story. Robert Peoples, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out.
So, Robert, you are the leader of an organization called Affinis Humanity, whose mission statement is to alleviate religious discrimination for secular communities in education, business, and government. I understand you've just participated in the Secular Day at the Capitol in Arizona. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And so I'm really excited to hear about your work and in the secular community. I tell you what, man, your tagline, to be human is enough, just gets me. That is, you have spoken to this atheist soul. I can tell you with that statement. This podcast, we talk about secular grace a lot, and I think that you and your work embodies that. And as I mentioned off mic, you have made me a fan of yours, so I'm just really excited to have you on.
Oh, I'm honored. I'm honored. Thank you for that.
So we're going to spend the first half talking about your personal story, and then probably the second half we'll get into all the things that you're doing with your work in the secular community. So
Okay.
let's start where we often do. What was your faith tradition growing up? What was that like for you?
So I grew up. I'm originally from New Jersey. I currently reside in Arizona right now, and I grew up in a Baptist household. I grew up in a Baptist church. Actually, it was called Union Baptist. I can't believe I still remember the name of the church. And and unlike unlike a lot of other people that have experienced, the RTS, the religious trauma syndrome connected with religion, uh, I did not. I liked going to church. I liked the people. I liked my friends. And I even sung in the choir. And however, I always had a lot of questions. I was always very inquisitive about things.
Hmm.
And a lot of those questions couldn't be answered sufficiently. And when I was uh, about 13 years old, I started having a lot of questions. And my mother was saying, well, you need to talk to the pastor, you need to talk to the deacon about this. And I said, I did, but it just doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. I need to do a
Mm.
little bit more digging. So my cousin, my first cousin, he said, you know what, Robert, I'm going to give you a book, man. I want you to read The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine.
Oh
I
wow.
was
Okay.
13 when I wrote that book, man. I was
Yeah.
I was 13, right? My mother
Yeah.
always instilled reading in me at a very early age. And so I was very thankful for that. In the classroom, she didn't want me to be the kind of kid where if the teacher called on you to read a paragraph, I would shy away from it. So she really instilled heavy reading in me at an early age. And I have to tell you, David, when I read The Age of Reason, that set my trajectory on a whole different path. Uh, and so from there, I told my mother, I want to study Islam for a little bit. She said, okay. Well, I work with some doctors, and there is a mosque in Princeton University. And so, if you want to learn Islam, you're going to learn true Islam. You're going to
Mm.
learn how to speak Arabic and the whole nine. And so, I was doing Salat in Arabic, went to the mosque for about 2 years. And I said to myself, okay, I get it. Now I want to learn Buddhism.
Mm.
She knew a doctor that was a Buddhist, a couple, and there was a Buddhist temple in Princeton University. So I studied Buddhism for a couple of years. And so about that time, I was about 17, 18 years old. And I said, I have a pretty good foundation of what all of these belief systems are, not so
Hmm.
much Buddhism, because actually Buddhism is actually atheistic in nature, right? It doesn't have
Hmm.
a central Godhead. There's a saying that goes, if you ever see the Buddha on the side of the road, kill it, because that's not the
Okay.
Buddha, right? You are the
Right.
Buddha,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
And about 17, 18 years old, I said, okay, I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. And my mother had a hard time with that. The rest of my family had a hard time with that. But I did not face any, I was not ostracized.
Hmm.
I was not treated any differently. So I don't have any, horror stories regarding that. She said, well, why don't you believe in something? Even I want you to be a Christian, but even if you stayed a Muslim, right? Just believe in something. And I
Mm.
said, I can't, because this is based on critical thinking. It's not based on emotion. No one in the
Yeah.
church hurt me. The pastor didn't hurt me. People weren't mean to me. This was based on critical thinking. This was based on just academic research, history, science. And, I made that declaration. And so I got out very early. It wasn't, I wasn't like in my, cause I'm in my late 40s now. And so I wasn't in my 30s or 40s when I decided to deconstruct. I started deconstructing in my teens. So, good for me. Right.
Yeah.
Because I
Yes.
didn't have
Yes.
to wrestle, with the psychological trauma of that. And so, yeah, that's how I was raised up, man. I was raised up as a hardcore Baptist. And, my mother is still a Christian till this day, but her eyes have opened up to a lot of different issues that we've talked about throughout the years. And so, um, yeah, that's kind of like my journey. It started out early, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always say that I think for precocious kids and somebody who can read the age of reason at 13 is precocious. Christianity and just, more fundamentalist religion in general is just a really hard place to be, especially you're asking questions to the deacon and you're just not getting the answers that you want. And so, man, proud of you to, grow through that and not fold under the pressure. What I find now on this side of deconversion is
Mhm.
the recognition of just the social pressure of religion. Even like your mom saying, just believe in something. There's that social pressure of that concern that you believe in something.
Absolutely. And I didn't tell you during my teenage years, I was also reading Nietzsche, Ludwig Feuerbach, Soren Kierkegaard. Oh, I went down a philosophy matrix.
Yeah.
And so, I just wrestled with a lot of things very, very early. And I would say to anyone, that is deconstructing to start implementing philosophy in your life because
Mm,
it teaches you how to think, not what to think,
yeah.
and that really helped me out, David.
That's awesome. You have it's either Instagram or TikTok where you talk about the reverse engineering of theology by using the tool of philosophy, and just like you say, how it teaches you how to think.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, that is so much fun. I'm super jealous. I didn't come to philosophy until much later in life, and I really, really wish I would have been exposed to it earlier.
Hey, but hey, better, better to grasp it, now than later. It's something, and I blame our educational system for
Mm,
that, because in a lot of European schools, they're teaching philosophy in grade school. And here
yeah.
in America, we're not introduced into philosophy until we want to take it almost as an elective in college. They don't teach that in high school in America, so so a lot of us just miss the boat with that. If you don't seek it out, you're not going to learn it.
And then just one more comment about your story. I think how important it is the step back and the look at comparative religions. So you did it the real way. You went and actually studied each of those religions, but even just taking a class just to be able to recognize the similarities and differences. There are cultural differences, radical cultural differences, but there are so many similarities as well that it is incredibly difficult when you look at it as a whole, all of humanity and all of the religious beliefs that humanity has had over time, to say, well, mine is correct and all the rest of them are incorrect.
Absolutely. And and what comparative religions, the lesson programs teaches us as well is that we are kind of restricted in this box of geography. If I grew up in Iran, if I grew up in Iraq, I'd probably be a Muslim,
Mm. Yeah.
right? If I grew up, in China, China is predominantly an atheistic country, right? I would have been born an atheist, right? My parents would probably be secular inherently, right? So
Hmm.
basically, our belief systems are based on our geography, really.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Exactly.
comparative religions teaches you that, like, okay, over here, over there, and it's like, oh, okay, so it's just by happenstance that I was a Christian in my early years, based on, and also based on the fact that 80% of African Americans in America are Christian of some
Mm.
sort.
Yeah.
So that leads to a whole other history, dealing with the Atlantic slave trade and all that, so there's like a lot of rich history with that. So
Let's address that. So I've heard other Black atheists talk about being a minority of a minority. How difficult is it to be a Black atheist? Within your own community, within the atheist community, are there extra challenges there?
huge challenges. I could say emphatically that coming out to one's family in the Black community as gay is better than to come out that you're an atheist.
Mm,
Homosexuality is more embraced than you coming out saying that you don't believe in a God in the Black community. Um, it is hard. Years ago, even when I was dating, I would have women say to me, you're a great guy. You're a great guy, but I'm looking for a God fearing man.
mm.
But good luck on your dating journey. And I'm
Yeah,
like, wow. So it doesn't matter how someone treats you. It doesn't matter how a man treats you. You're more consumed with his theological background, with his belief system, than just treating you like a great human being.
yeah.
That's unfortunate. I've lost friends, friends that because I shoot pool. Like I love shooting pool, and
Oh, cool.
friends that I've met just at the pool hall. And we talk about a lot of things. And one person in particular I knew for 2 years, and all of a sudden religion came up, and I said, "Oh yeah,
Mm.
I'm not religious." He was like, "Oh, so you're just spiritual." No, it's more than that. Right? It's a little
Yeah,
more than that. I'm an
yeah.
atheist. I'm an atheist, and I'm a humanist as well. And he said, "What? Well, how do you think you got here?" I said, "Evolution." And slowly but surely, he distanced himself from me.
Mm.
And
Wow.
that happened several times. Years, just being friends, and that one thing, it just, had me shunned, and, that was difficult, but I gained so many more friends, so many more
Mm.
like-minded individuals, and so it made up for that. But yes, being a unicorn, yes, being, a Black male who's an atheist, who is also a feminist, who is also for human rights. Yeah, I am in like the fraction of a percentile in this country, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's difficult, and I'm gonna just say this: by my by me being an atheist, by me being a humanist, for what it's worth, I've been embraced more, David, by the white American community than I
Okay.
have my own.
Oof.
because
Okay.
of because of this. And I don't say that lightly. I that took a lot for me to just say that. That took a lot for me to say that. And but it's true. But now, especially being on social media now, especially Instagram, more and more Black people, more and more people of color in general are coming forward,
Mm.
and expressing their ordeals with societal religiosity. And it's given me hope. It's really given me hope. And so, um, yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult. But now it's I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay with it because I have a huge support base, and I have people that love me, and I wouldn't change my decision for the world.
you have, mentioned a few times, I think, in Instagram and TikTok to normalize Black atheism. And I think you and your voice of, it's more than just atheism. It's the humanism in it. It's the humanity. It's a loving people part that I think is what will reach religious communities, right? Like, that's what's going to reach in and say, hey, there's a way that you can live and be a kind person without having to have a religious faith.
And I definitely agree with that. That's why a lot of times when I have conversations with people and people question, my belief system or even lack thereof, I always start out. I used to always start out with the whole, atheist conjecture.
Yeah.
But over the course of a few years, I lead off with humanism because I basically I live my life, I identify by what I do believe in versus what I don't believe in. And I think, like you said, that opens up ears a little bit more when I say, I believe in you. I believe in people, right? I believe in change. And if any change is going to happen, we have to do it. There's no savior coming to save us. That responsibility is ours. And people tend to perk up their ears just a little bit more when they hear that. Because let's be honest, all atheists aren't humanists.
Right.
Right? You
Yes. No,
can't
that's definitely true.
right? You can't be a racist and be a humanist. I know atheists that are racist, right? You can't be a humanist and be homophobic. I do know atheists that are homophobic, right? And so, so the two aren't, mutually exclusive. You know what I'm saying? And so I like to lead with humanism because that kind of lays the foundation when I have a conversation with individuals.
Awesome. Let's expound on that. How did you discover humanism? Who are some of your humanist influences?
Oh, well, see, I know a lot of people have issues with Nietzsche, in his, nihilistic, views on life. It could be a little dark. But
Yeah.
for me, he was the ultimate humanist for me. He critiqued religion so much, but it wasn't just out of just critiquing it just to create arguments. He cared about how it affected people. And I was put on to him by my cousin, who also put me on to Thomas Paine. But for a more kind of modern, I guess you could say, mentor that who I never met, uh, Old Hitch, Christopher Hitchens.
Okay.
Oh man, for me, he was the epitome of humanism. If it was anyone that I could have met, before his departure on this earth, it would have been Old Hitch. He and I liked his veracity. He didn't mince words, and I think one of the reasons why humanism and secularism has not really created a foothold in the government and businesses and education is because we're still dancing around eggshells because we don't want to offend the sensibilities of religionists,
Hmm.
right? We still kind of want to give this kind of soft answer. And, you can't go for the jugular vein all the time, right? But
Right. Right.
you have to stand your ground, right? It's like something what Malcolm X once said. He says, I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even if he's wrong, than one who comes like an angel and is nothing but a devil, right? I
Mm.
don't care if I think that you're wrong or right, but stand on something, right? Make a decision, make an executive decision. And I loved Hitch for that. Hitch did not care. And especially in this era of evangelicalism, this Christian nationalism that is basically warped into fascism, they're bold. They are
Mm,
bold. I mean, we have legislators that are saying, "Hey, incest and rape, they're, no, they're not exempt from the abortion. Hey, if you're raped, guess what?
mm,
It's a gift from God. Look at it as a gift from God." They're they're saying what they want to say. They're bold. But us as humanists, us as atheists, us as secularists, we're still kind of like, no, no, you shouldn't say that. That's against the Constitution. The
mm,
First Amendment says we have to be a little bit more aggressive in how we attack this evangelicalism that has arrested our government. We have to be a
mm.
little bit more, even on the verge of being a little bit more militant about it, but militant with love,
Right.
right? Militant with love. And so, um, yeah, old Hitch. Yeah, old Hitch, old time Nietzsche, but modern old Hitch for me. Old Hitch was the ultimate humanist for me.
I want to hear your thoughts on how humanism can or cannot be, in your opinion, a benefit for the Black community. Do you see that as something that the Black community is missing or needs, or is that just something that has been helpful to you personally?
Um, I think it is essential. In my opinion, I think it is a mandate for Black America to get out of the situation that it's in. Um, I believe that societal religiosity has hampered the progress of Black people in this country. It has made us docile in how we are treated because, hey, don't worry about what happens to you here.
Mm,
You're going to be in the great by and by forever. Just life is just temporary. Don't worry about what people do to you. And that message has been destructive. Uh, as Bob Marley once said, you know, if you knew what life was worth, you would look for yours on earth. And now you see the light, you stand up for your rights. And once we realize that heaven is what we create here,
mm,
heaven is what we create generationally. Once we understand that and we break the chains of religion, we'll be able to see life differently and we'll be able to move differently other than just marching. Because, David, let's be honest, marching hasn't helped. For society to say, well, you know what, just dress a certain way, just dress professionally. Well, MLK was assassinated. So he wore suits. So that doesn't help. Protesting hasn't helped. If anything, things have gotten worse. And a lot of it is because we're still arrested, mentally arrested in this form of religiosity where we're just like, it's going to get better. God has it. It's in God's plan. We may not understand it now, but we just have to just be strong about it instead of doing the work ourselves. And it pains me to see my people just drag through the mud and not promote action because we're waiting on a savior to make everything okay.
mm,
There's something to say psychologically about when, as a child, no matter how much you studied, as an athlete, no matter how much blood, sweat, and tears you spent in practicing, getting injured, studying the playbook, you then say, all of this couldn't have been accomplished without the power of God. You have set your own abilities aside,
yeah.
to give all of the glory to what? And what that does to us is it makes us codependent on, and I'm gonna be honest, it makes us codependent on benevolent white leaders in power for God to somehow change their hearts and change their minds.
Mm. Yeah.
That is what religion has us doing, waiting on benevolent white leaders that don't really care about us, that God is going to change their heart. We have to not be so concerned about changing hearts. We need to be concerned about changing policy. I
Mm.
don't care what you think about me, but you're going to change this policy. And if
Right.
something happens, you're going to be held lawful for that. And so that's why I believe humanism is an absolute necessity. And it has to be something else as well. I can't say leave this religion alone, come on to the side of humanism. But we're not offering anything. Let's be honest. The church has had a head start.
Yeah.
The church is
Yes.
communal, David, right? I mean,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
if you need a job, so and so is a VP at this bank. Hey, they can get you a job. Oh, you want a mortgage? Oh, you know what? So and so is a loan officer. I mean, the church is a one stop, David. And so for us to say leave that communal rest haven and then come to the side of humanism, okay, what is there on that side? What's the benefit? I'm struggling. What do you have to offer? Do you have any outreach services? What do you
Mm.
have to offer? And
Right.
so, when we're talking about, like Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, you can't think transcendental thoughts. You can't think about leaving religion and thinking about humanism and the philosophical connotations of what that means when you can't eat, when
Yeah.
you're about to be evicted, when you're about to be foreclosed, when you have no support, but you can go to the local church and get support.
Mm.
We have to do better. We have to
Yeah.
create organizations that help people, and that will make humanism very much attractive because we're people, right? Humans are communal creatures.
Yeah.
You see, we have to
Yeah.
have something else besides philosophy in order to bring people in. And that's my take on that, man.
Yeah. I had Anthony Pinn on of Rice University, and he talked about
Oh, he's great. Oh, he's
he's
great.
amazing. Yeah. Talked about something very similar of like we need to have a soft place to land for people coming out of religion in general, and then the black community in particular of like you say resources, the community, that all of those things that's what I'm driving at trying to build. Like how can we build community that could meet the real world needs of people in the world that the church has been doing for millennia, right? And
Right.
and that's when I think humanism becomes functional, as it were, right?
And you know what? I want to be a part of that. Hey,
Yeah.
let's brainstorm. You know what I
Yes,
mean? Like
absolutely.
let's brainstorm and create, a like national organization with that. Like you said, humanism has to be functional.
Yeah.
It can't just be in the head.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I sometimes talk about like I want a humanism that bleeds, sweats, and cries. Like that we've had it so much so that it's the philosophers talking in their white towers, and I'm much more interested in what it's like to you're going to be evicted and you're hungry and you've got 4 children. What do you do then? That's what actually matters. That's what actually counts. And how do we apply the principles of humanism in that environment?
Oh, excellent. That's you hit the hammer on the nail with that one.
I want to talk more about secularism. That isn't necessarily something that we talk a lot about on the podcast. So, what is secularism to you? And then that'll be a springboard for you to talk about Affinis Humanity and what you're doing with that work.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so the terminology secularism, it's there's duality that exists within the term, right? It has a dual meaning, right? So the political meaning is anyone who believes and upholds the separation of church and state. So actually, you could be a Christian, but if you believe in the separation of church and state, by political definition, you are secular by nature. If you're a
Yeah.
Muslim and you believe in the separation of church and state, you are secular. Now, of course, just like any other words evolve over time throughout history. And so now secularism has become more attached to individuals that have no religious affiliation. Right.
Right. Right.
It has evolved into that. But I think people should always keep in mind that it has a dual meaning. And I am willing to work with anyone that is for the separation of church and state. I don't have to agree with your theological base, but if you believe in the separation of church and state, we can work together. you,
Yes,
you
exactly.
know, and that, brings me to how I got connected actually with the Secular Coalition for Arizona. Lobbyist extraordinaire, Tori Roberg, reached out to me on Facebook. I've been living in Arizona for about 13 years, and about a little over 3 years ago, she just messaged me and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of the Secular Coalition for Arizona?" Like, no, I've never heard of
Huh.
the organization. So I started digging, and I'm like, wow, they're a 501c4. They're a political nonprofit. Wow, with
Hmm.
a lobbyist. Wow, that just blew my mind. And
Yeah.
so I met with the chair, and I was a part of the organization for a few years. And so that really started getting me aware of the politics that go on with trying to implement this Atwoodian handmaid's tale society
Mm.
within the government. And it
Yeah.
just blew my mind. I performed the secular studies there, where I would speak with a room full of lawmakers, senators, House of Representatives, and we would just have a closed door session on what it means to keep Arizona secular. And sometimes emotions flared, right? Because
Yeah.
you have people, you got Christians in there, you got hardcore Christians in there. You have some senators, senators that are atheist, right, in there. And but at the end of the day, everyone was respectful, and I learned so much about that. And so that really kind of fueled my desire to really get into um, the government aspects of that. Before that, I was into the schools, and I'm still into schools. I have to tell this story. So I have a friend, and he's a principal at a school here in Gilbert, Arizona. And if anyone knows about Gilbert, Arizona, it is very well Mormon occupied,
Ah,
heavily,
okay.
heavily. And so a friend of mine, she has a daughter, and she was the class president. And so she said, "Robert, I want you to come to my school and talk about what it is to be a humanist." I said, "Okay." So, of course, I had to talk. I had a meeting with the principal and a meeting with the superintendent as well. And he said, "Okay, Robert, I'm going to tell you now, you know what territory you're in. You're in Mormonville. You have a very small box to operate under, a very small box to operate. There are going to be fires. I know that there are going to be fires. I just want them to be manageable. So you got a small box to move in. Got you."
Yeah.
I went in there. I did about a 2-hour presentation. When I asked everyone, what is their, if they would like to share what is their belief system or lack thereof, I would say about 75% were like, "I'm atheist. I'm agnostic. I'm bisexual and agnostic. I'm gay and I'm a secularist. I'm a human." I'm like, whoa, wait a
Yeah.
minute. I'm sort of preaching to the choir, so to speak here, right? And of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
you had other ones that were Mormon, right?
Sure.
And Q&A came up. They asked a lot of questions. And at the end of the day, I received about, I don't know, maybe about 30, 40 emails from parents saying, thank you for your presentation. And the name of that presentation is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, right? If I could say that, right? The
Yeah,
name of the
yeah,
presentation was "To Be Human Is Enough."
yeah. Ugh, yeah. Love it. I
And
love it.
that was, that was, wow, maybe 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
and so I was in it. So I went to other several schools, was very well received, and then of course COVID had to show its head, and so that kind of interrupted the flow of a lot of things. But from school, then I wanted to get into business and then government, and that's when the whole secularism bit came about, and serving on the board with this wonderful organization really opened up my eyes, really educated me on a lot of things, got me connected with lawmakers. Even though we might not see eye to eye, I made a lot of progress with them and influenced a lot of policies that they created. There's still a lot of work to be done, but yes, I just want to let people know that are, atheists, humanists, that it's okay if someone believes in a god, or if they're religious, work with them if they uphold the separation of church and state, because in the grand scheme of things, we all need each other. We don't have to agree with one another, but the key thing is to understand. I don't have to agree with you, but I want to understand your perspective. And to me, that's more important than agreement.
I love it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, quick story on that. I think even as a Christian, I was very much for the separation of church and state because it's both good for the church and good for the state. And
Right.
so when I went through deconversion, that was just an obvious thing that that's important to uphold. And I think within 2016, we had a real world example of that as kind of Christian nationalism came to the front stage. And I watched my wife is still very much a believer, but I watched her grieve, how Christianity was being manipulated politically. And I think that's just a testament to why separation of church and state is important, even for believers, because it may not be your brand of Christianity that is being represented politically.
And that's something that we consistently and perpetually brought up in the chambers of lawmakers, is that, you know what, like you said very eloquently, your brand of Christianity may be looked down upon.
Mm, yeah.
So a secular society is best for everyone, for
Yes.
everyone. And it's just, peer reviewed studies have, shown that, in the happiness index report that comes out by the United Nations, the most happiest countries in the world happen to be the most secular.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Children who grow up in secular households exude higher levels of empathy than religious children,
Yeah. Interesting.
which
Yeah.
would shock a lot of people, right? But
Yeah.
but if you really dig, and being, coming from an ex-Christian background, both of us, we can kind of understand why that is, right? Because it's a level of accountability. If I do you wrong, if I commit a wrong to you, I can't go into my closet and pray about it and say, well, you know what? God forgave me. I don't care if you
Mm,
don't forgive me. My Lord forgave me. So I'm going to go on with my life. As a person who is a non believer, I have to rectify the wrong that I committed to you. I
mm,
can't
yeah.
go in my closet and ask God for forgiveness. I have to come to you, man to man, woman to woman, and say, I'm sorry. How can I fix this? So it makes sense about the empathy being higher with children that have no religious affiliation. It makes sense. And I have a question for you, if I can ask you a
Sure. Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Please. Yeah. Go
You
for it.
said your wife is still a Christian, is still a believer.
Yes.
How, I'm curious, how do you two navigate through this ordeal?
That's a whole podcast in itself. Well, I'll tell you, it's your tagline. To be human is enough. In that, I recognize, first of all, how much I love my wife and that
Mm.
I embrace all of her humanity, which includes her faith. But it's very hard, right? Like I don't want to pretend like it isn't difficult. We have a number of listeners to the podcast that are in what we call unequally yoked relationships, and it's challenging. It is hard, but we have recognized we've been able to communicate to one another that we love each other for who we are, and that we're committed to the relationship, and that we want to work through it. We both want to work through it. That really helps. And so not every relationship, I think, will survive through this unequally yoked thing. But one of the things that made me want to start the podcast was to differentiate from some of the atheist voices out there that were, burn the bridge on your way out and go out in a blaze of glory, right? And just,
Yes, yes.
yeah, there are some relationships you want to keep. Obviously, not abusive ones or psychologically or physically or anything like that, but ones that you want to keep. And so, one of the messages that I wanted to have was this secular grace includes the believers in our lives to not see believers as dumb or ignorant or what have you, but to remember what it was like to be convinced. I was 100% convinced, Robert, 100%, and so I can't see that as lesser than or less intellectual or something like that. And so again, my whole thing is about embracing humanity, embracing my humanity, embracing the humanity of others, and that includes and entails other believers.
I like I like the whole secular grace, atheist grace, because I do see that a lot. I see a lot of ad hominem attacks,
Yeah,
people actually attacking people's character because they're still a Christian or they believe in some God of some sort. And we've all been, I mean, at least for me, I think the majority of us, the number one reason we were Christians in the first place was because we were indoctrinated ever since we've had a rattle in our hand and a pacifier in our mouth. I
yes,
mean, I mean, our brains are, the human brain doesn't fully develop until about 25 years old. So
yeah,
imagine you're an infant, and you're experiencing all this stuff. And it's no wonder people are struggling, and me knowing that, I can't commit ad hominem attacks to believers because I know why they believe. I know why they're resistant to information because the indoctrination, man, the tentacles of indoctrination are deep and they reach far. And that's why religious trauma syndrome is a thing, and some people never, some people will forever deconstruct. Some people will never reach a conclusion, right? They will always struggle with the residuals of their, deconstruction of their religiosity. They'll always, I know people that tell me, Robert, I know hell doesn't exist. I know it doesn't exist, but you know what? Every once in a while, I raise an eyebrow and I get a little nervous.
mm.
Isn't that something? You know that it doesn't exist, but because of the level of indoctrination that you've experienced as a child, the residuals are still there. Even though you know it's not real, you still have a physical reaction to it. Man, that's heavy. I almost look. I really not almost. I'm a be hitch in this moment. Not almost. It is a form of psychological child abuse. It is a
Yeah,
form of psychological child abuse. Children should be raised in a neutral setting and let them decide. Let them decide what they want to do.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't go for that when people attack people's character for I don't stand by that.
I can tell from the things I've read and listened to of yours. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, back to the comparative religion. Imagine if we did middle school comparative religion class that, as children reach the age of reason, they get exposure to more options and, would be able to make their own choices quite a bit better. So,
Absolutely. What? because I talked about what kind of led me down that trajectory of embracing atheism and humanism more importantly. What led you on that path? As a former Christian, what transition in your life that started you questioning your own belief system?
Man, again, this could be an entire podcast.
Another podcast.
Yeah, yeah. With 2020 hindsight, I recognize that I was a religious humanist, right? Like I was all about grace. I came to Christianity in my teens, so I feel like I had a little bit of a sense of my own self
Okay.
without that childhood indoctrination. But I stayed in it for 27 some odd years, so it wasn't that I got out of it easy. But I always was focused on people, and I felt like the attractive part of Jesus was I came for the sick and not the well, and and the attack on hypocrisy of the religious leaders, and that's what drew me to Jesus, and that was the thing that I thought it was supposed to be about. And
Hmm.
it was years of watching other people not feel that same way or not think of Jesus the same way and be more focused on rules and not having sex and things that just didn't feel as important, right? Like it was about caring for people. And so early on, I had friends who were gay where I recognized, I can't hate this person. I love this person.
Hmm.
That was one part of it. Intellectually, for sure, I deconstructed long before I knew what deconstruction was, right? I had let go of
Mm.
literalist interpretation. I had let go of even the authority of scripture, had really lost all of it there near the end. I tell a story about reading through the Bible in a year or so before I deconverted, and my wife would be like, "You're angry. Why are you so angry?" like, and it was that I was reading it without the rose-colored glasses on for the first time,
Right.
and it was painful what I was seeing there, and like, so I talk about this in an article I wrote called "How to Deconvert in 10 Easy Steps" as a joke, but you have this moment where you give yourself permission to doubt, permission to go and seek information outside of the bubble, and I feel like that happened to me roughly a year before a deconversion for me. And I just started to allow myself to hear outside voices. The occasional article would come up from an atheist perspective, and I'd find that I didn't disagree with them entirely.
Right.
Yeah, things like the separation of church and state, all of those things. But I always like to say it was 1,000 things, not just one. Those are some of the mileposts along the way. But I had an oh shit moment where
Mm.
I was reading a Greta Christina article that was talking about the lack of the existence of a soul, and I realized I agreed with that, and I was like, oh shit, I don't believe, and I was done. There was no progressive Christianity for me. There was no anything else. I finally was able to just say, kind of my skeptical personality, my need for answers, as I think you have eloquently described for yourself as well. I was just going to embrace that and let's go find, you know, the science and the philosophy that has, evidence and argumentation and and things that felt like I could press on them really hard and be really skeptical and they would still remain true.
Right.
And how unlike that was for my faith, where it felt like I was betraying God by testing him by asking questions and things like that. So that's the quick version. Again, I could tell a very long long version of it, but
Oh, no, I appreciate that, David, man. Like you said about doubt, man. How does the quote go? All great truths start out as blasphemies,
yes,
right?
yes,
It's that doubt. Doubt is the beginning of wisdom.
yes,
And that's something that the church really teaches against. you
yes.
know and so yeah, man, thanks for sharing that. Like when you said you were done, and that was listening to what you were saying, you were deconstructing for years, what I mean?
Yes,
So that's when you came to that conclusion, like kind of very easily, like, oh, I'm done.
Yes.
Because you had the
Yeah.
years of not even knowing that you were really deconstructing.
I
So,
had no idea. I was completely ignorant that that's what was happening, but that's exactly what was happening. Yeah.
oh, that's
Yeah.
good stuff, man. Good stuff. Thank you for that, man.
We've been talking about a lot of things, some of them negative. I want to hear a little bit about you have an Instagram where you talk about the benefits and the joy of being on this side of deconversion. Just like to hear you expound on that for a bit. Like, what is it like for you today that you've left kind of the religious bonds behind?
I wow, I can I'll lead it with a quote from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh,
Right. Oh yeah, right.
you got me
You
there.
know, well, what was it? Was it Douglas Adams, right? Who
Yes.
said, you know, why is it that we can't look at a garden as beautiful without thinking that there are fairies at the bottom of it too?
Mm, yeah.
That I'll open up with that. The benefits of walking away from religion and the benefits of humanism is it has increased my love for humanity exponentially.
Mm,
I no longer love people with conditions on their sexual orientation, their conditions on their ethnicity, their conditions on their gender. I can walk out of my house and I look at the hummingbird differently. I'm in awe when I see a hummingbird. I'm in awe when I see ants. When I'm walking on the street, I'm always looking down because when I look at ants, which are the strongest insects probably alive that can lift to 50 to 100 times its body weight. Can you imagine if we could do
mm,
that as a human? I'm 6'5", about 225. Can you imagine me lifting 100 times my own body weight?
yeah.
I just have such a reverence for nature around me. I can wake up in the morning and I don't have to go to a book. I don't have to go to archaic scriptures to lead me. The book of life opens up each and every time I wake up in the morning. I
Mm,
write my own book, David. Um, I can love people regardless of their belief. Before when I was a Christian, I I wasn't around people who didn't believe. I looked at them like they were crazy. Now, even as a non-believer, I can look at a Muslim as a Christian because I have a lot of Christian friends. I have a lot of
mhm,
Muslim friends, and I love them. Even still, I may not agree with them, but it doesn't impede upon the love I exude for them.
mm.
And it's such a bag of heavy bricks just to lay down, knowing that I'm not going to be here forever,
Mm,
that I'm not going to be in this, heavenly firmament forever. There is there is peace and tranquility knowing that my life is finite because it allows me to love life more. I don't want to live forever. I want to do things where I know there is a limited capacity. I have an expiration date in this world. And so that allows me to try to make as much of an impact as I can every day of my life. And I enjoy life more because it's finite.
I
I
want to say
love my
preach.
daughters more, man. I love my daughters more, man.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you know what, I'm probably going to outlive you, but I'm gonna make sure that I have the greatest impact I have in your life. Accountability, David. If I do it wrong, I'm going to remedy it. I'm going to bring rectification to the issue and to see someone look at me like, wow, that took a lot for you to come forward. I don't know if I could have done that. I would probably have had to pray about it, talk to my church leaders, the accountability. If I'm
Mm.
wrong, I'm wrong. That's it. And so those are some of the benefits of humanism, man. Just a reverence and an appreciation for life and humanity, man.
I could not have said it any better. That was amazing. Well, Robert, I am just profoundly impacted by your work. To be human is enough is going to stick with me for for years. I'm going to be quoting you on that one. So I hope that you and I can become friends. I hope that we can do more work together. I love your work. I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can reach out for you to you, how they can contribute to your work, how they can find you.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone, you can go to my website to learn more. It's affinishumanity.org. It's Affinis. Just a little side note. So affinis is the Latin derivative of the word affinity, which means a natural attraction to a person, thing, or idea. And my attraction is to humanity,
Mm,
thus humanism. You can find me on Instagram, Affinis Humanity, and also Facebook, the same, and TikTok as well, Affinis Humanity. And I like to hear from everyone. And yes,
absolutely.
David, we must, when social media works, it works, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
I want
Yeah,
our connection to extend past this podcast. You know what I mean? I
yes.
want to really, connect with you and just brainstorm about, some of the things that you were speaking about, bringing the functionality to humanism to society, to real world issues. And I'm all for that, man. And so yes, let's stay in touch. Absolutely.
Robert Peoples, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Final thoughts on the episode. To be human is enough. Robert has captured secular grace in that phrase. I literally will be thinking about that phrase for the rest of my life. It is such a simple way to capture it, and it has deep meaning for humanists. It has deep meaning for anti racism. It has deep meaning for being a human being, period. Like Robert said, when social media works, it really works. I really appreciate this connection. I do want to thank Arlene for prodding both Robert and I to connect with one another. Arlene, our community manager for the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group. Robert's work touches so many of the things that I care about. As we mentioned, the secular grace and beginning with humanism and loving people without conditions. I need to quote him here at least once. He says, I believe in you. I believe in people. I believe in change. And if any change is going to happen, we have to do it. There is no savior coming to save us. That responsibility is ours. And Robert's work in secularism. If for any reason that word secularism is bothersome to you, think of pluralism. Really, that's all we're saying is that no one ideology, whether it's religious, economic, philosophical, or cultural, dominates in a political sense such that all other ideas are shut down. And the example is, like I mentioned with my wife, who is very much a Christian, but watched as a version of Christian nationalism and not the Christianity that she would endorse, gained political power. You cannot guarantee that even if you are a believer, that the version of Christianity that gains political power will be your version. And even if it is your version, you cannot guarantee that it will maintain that power. And so secularism or pluralism, the marketplace of ideas and ideologies, where there is freedom of speech, there is no religious test for political office, is an ideal and it is both good for the church and it is good for the state. I love the work that Robert is doing in Arizona, promoting secularism. That is boots on the ground, doing the hard work. I truly loved the way that Robert talked about reverse engineering theology with philosophy and how important philosophy was to him even as a young man, starting with Paine's Age of Reason and going into Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and the existentialists. I can sometimes be negative towards the philosophy bros, but I need you to understand how much I appreciate philosophy and how important it is. It forces us to think deeply and critically about what we think and why, what we believe and why, and to be able to articulate an argument for it. It is incredibly important. And like Robert, I encourage everyone to dig in and learn philosophy. I very much appreciated Robert's willingness to talk about race. That can be such an uncomfortable subject. And I appreciated the level of honesty that he brought to the table, talking about not being accepted by his own community and how hard that is. I also appreciated how much he recognizes that humanism can add to the Black community. And Robert is such a powerful voice to spread that message and to spread a message of loving people without conditions. I want to encourage you to check out Robert's website, affinishumanity.org. The links will be in the show notes. He has t-shirts available. I think you can support him financially and the work that he is doing. He's also participating in the Secular Coalition for Arizona. We'll have links in the show notes for that as well. Please reach out to Robert and support the work that he is doing. Robert is a quote machine. Go back, listen to this. I've listened to it twice already. He is an amazing human being and has such wisdom to share. I am very glad that I got to meet Robert. I hope that he and I will have an opportunity to work together again. I want to thank Robert for being on the podcast, for sharing his wisdom, for sharing his love for humanity, for sharing his joy in humanism and the freedom that he experiences in that. Thank you, Robert, for being on the show. The secular grace thought of the week is just to expound upon to be human is enough. I'm not sure that I can adequately expand on this. It is so profound in its simplicity. So much of what I am trying to say with secular grace is about embracing our humanity. When I say humanity, I mean our foibles, our weaknesses, as well as our strengths, as well as our intellect and rationality. So much of religion tries to deny our humanity, that our normal human desires and wants are evil and wrong. You know, who we love or what color our skin is and what we think in our private thoughts get categorized and moralized so that we turn in on ourselves and begin to hate ourselves. So much of what I want with secular grace is for us to be able to embrace ourselves as human beings and embrace one another as human beings. And that does include the human beings who believe in a theistic God. It does include human beings of a different race. It includes human beings of different gender identities and sexual orientations. It includes and people of religions other than Christianity. It includes people of other cultures. It is so easy to otherize the people with whom we disagree or who are different from ourselves and to deny their humanity. So my challenge to you is to recognize the humanity even in the people who you find difficult to love. This is secular grace. As I mentioned, we're going to take a break next week for your Easter holiday. Please re-listen to this episode 4 or 5 times. I mean, really, this Robert is an amazing person and has so much to say. And then if you want to go into the back catalog, and the links will be in the show notes, to Jennifer Michael Hecht, Anthony Pinn, and Sasha Sagan's episodes, I highly recommend those for a Secular Grace holiday weekend. Until next time, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. Time for the footnotes. The beat is called Waves from Mackay Beats. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can promote it on your social media. You can subscribe to it in your favorite podcast application, and you can rate and review it on podchaser.com. You can also support the podcast by clicking on the affiliate links for books on gracefulatheist.com. If you have podcast production experience and you would like to participate with the podcast, please get in touch with me. Have you gone through a faith transition and do you need to tell your story? Reach out. If you are a creator or work in the deconstruction, deconversion, or secular humanism spaces and would like to be on the podcast, just ask. If you'd like to financially support the podcast, there's links in the show notes. To find me, you can Google Graceful Atheist, you can Google deconversion, you can Google secular grace, you can send me an email, gracefulatheist@gmail.com, or you can check out the website, gracefulatheist.com. My name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. This has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast.